Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. Welcome back to another episode of Plant-Centered and Thriving. My name's Ashley and I'm here with Katie today. And oh boy, do we have an episode for you. We have been researching, pulling statistics, pulling trends, plant-based food trends for 2022. And we're about to bring them to you all. And we are so pumped. But before we get there, we have a couple exciting announcements and just some, we want to be transparent with you and what's going on behind the scenes at Plant-Centered Nutrition and keep you updated on all the fun things that are happening. One of the most exciting things that happened toward the end of last year in 2021 was Plant-Centered Nutrition bringing another coach on board, and her name is Katie Selvey, and she's here with me today, as always.
So excited to be here, as always.
Well, I'm very grateful to have you. Katie and I met, and you probably know this, we met in 2019. She was a former client of mine, and she has just an incredible story, an incredible heart. And when I thought of bringing another coach on, I couldn't think of anyone better than Katie. So I'm very, very grateful to have her along my side, coaching other clients under Plant-Centered Nutrition.
Absolutely. I was so excited to be a part of the team officially, even though I've been a part of the team kind of behind the scenes. But as soon as Ashley and I started to work together, she just became one of my favorite human beings. So I believe in what she does and what she stands for 1,000%. And I have been at the beginning of my journey where a lot of you guys are starting right now. Maybe the people that are just starting to join us here, you're just starting to start in your transition. So I've been there, done that, been through it. So I really hope to take that experience as well as, all of my studies about nutrition into, 2022 and to help you along your journey to hopefully kind of pay it forwards.
Yay. Yep. You are definitely the woman for the job. I'm so happy to have you. Yes. And Katie has been working tirelessly behind the scenes for probably like over a year now. We've been working together. So it's been pretty fantastic. So speaking of working together, we have multiple ways that you can work with us, and we wanted to go through what that is. And then we're going to get into all the exciting statistics and trends that we pulled for you for 2022. But first, one-on-one coaching, which is what we just talked about, that is one way that you can work with Katie or I. And then we also run a group coaching program that starts this year, January 19th, 2022. And then more than likely we'll run it again later this year. So stay tuned for those details. And we're really excited. The last time we ran a group coaching program, it was so much fun. And the women in there were so incredible. And it was so cool to see everyone come together and support one another. It was just just a marvelous experience.
Yes. We are so excited about this group coaching program coming up. So if you guys are out there and you're struggling on your own, a lot of times having that group aspect, that community aspect where you have someone else in your corner that's kind of going through the same thing, and that extra layer of kind of accountability, especially when you're first starting out, can really, really be beneficial. But that's one of the big advantages to the group coaching program. So can't wait for that to start. It's going to be so much fun.
I could not agree more. So there's that. And then we also have our Positively Plant-Based course, which you can do at your own pace, wherever you want, from the comfort of your own home. Everything is virtual. And I have over 50 plus like mini modules in there of me recording myself with a PowerPoint type presentation. So that is a wonderful option as well. And then, of course, you also have the podcast, which we are so grateful that you are listening with us today. So there's that, and you can continue to follow along and get occasional updates from us here. And then also, too, you can follow us on social media. You can follow Plant-Centered Nutrition and then Plant-Centered Katie. We are both on Instagram and we're active there. We would love for you to come on over and say hi and let us know that you came from the podcast. And then we also have the Facebook group, which is Plant-Centered Nutrition. And that group is primarily, I would say, and Katie, I know you post a lot in there as well. We share a lot of recipes in there. If someone has a question, people are pretty quick to respond. So it's just a nice little community if you want that go-to platform that's a bit more private, and that you can ask a question in there without any judgment or any harassment and just get a heartfelt, positive, kind answer.
Yeah, there's so much great advantages, again, to having that kind of group aspect. There's no stupid questions. So, especially if you're just starting out, you can go there and you know that there's going to be like-minded individuals there, that maybe some have a little bit more experience. Again, we share recipes and ideas. So, sometimes we'll be talking about the best kitchen equipment. And then sometimes if someone has a kid, they're like, how do we get our kid to eat broccoli? Stuff like that. Definitely utilize that as a resource if you want.
All right, Katie, you ready to transition into statistics and trends?
Yes, I'm ready to nerd out.
Me too. So everything that we talk about here today, we will have links to those articles in the show notes. So if you want to read more or research more, you are more than welcome to do it. So let's jump right in and let's talk about the first few statistics, Katie. And this first one states that as many as 6% of US consumers say they are vegan. Y'all, that is a 500% increase compared to the just 1% in 2014. And then according to Ipsos, there are currently over 9.7 million American vegans. So wild.
Crazy. So if you're out there and you're like, I'm so alone, I know it might feel that way, but there's almost 10 million of us. We're taking over.
We are. And then, Katie, I know you pulled this one. More than 500,000 participants signed up for Veganuary's 2021 challenge. So last year, 500,000 participants signed up for Veganuary, which is a 25% increase from 2020.
Yeah, I just think that a lot of what we're going to talk about today is just the fact that more people are interested, and this is becoming so much more normalized than it was just a few short years ago. When you told a group of people that you were plant-based or vegan, they look at you like you have 3 heads and you're like, oh my God, this is so weird. And now it's so much more mainstream.
In 2021, plant-based food sales skyrocketed 2.5 times faster than in 2018 to 2020. Wow.
So we've all probably heard of Beyond Meat. So Beyond Meat is still currently the world's leading meat substitute product. And the vegan meat sales in the world has grown 72% between 2018 and 2020. So that is a staggering statistic. The meat industry is definitely taking notice, and the food industry in general, that the demand is there. And the more of us that there are, that demand's going to keep going up. And the more, alternatives and choices there are going to be for consumers. So that's so, so exciting. And then this is a big one. The plant-based meat accounted for 2% of the total US meat market in 2018. 2%.
And that was in 2018. So I imagine that has got to be so much more. I can't wait to see what it is currently. Talking about plant-based milk, the US consumption of plant-based milk increased by 61%. And that was in 2017, while the consumption of cow's milk declined by 22%. Yeah, and that was in 2017. And Katie, again, I would love to see eventually when they pull statistics for the last couple of years, what those look like. The most popular plant-based milk is almond milk, which currently holds more than 63% of the alternative milk industry. I actually didn't know that, Katie. Are you an almond milk drinker?
I definitely am almond milk most of the time, but I love an oat milk. That's probably my next favorite. And then soy milk is probably my third. I mean, there's like pea milk and coconut milk. There's so many different options for us. And I remember when I first started, it was soy milk and that was it. And it was so gross. And I was like, oh, I can't drink this. But now, the taste of the soy milk is so much better. And I 100% so much prefer the taste of all of these alternative milks to regular cow's milk. I think they're sweeter and more delicious, and I love them.
Yes, I agree. And then plant-based milk represents 14% of the American milk category, which that was actually much higher than I was expecting. And I'm sure, again, it's going to be even higher now.
Or 2% of the plant-based meat to the whole meat industry versus plant-based milk represents 14% of the American milk category. That is so insane to me. You can go to your grocery aisle, Harris Teeter, Lowe's, Food Line, wherever you shop, and you can look at the dairy aisle and definitely see, all of the options. It used to be one option and now there's tons. So I love seeing that 14%. Yay.
Yay. Another statistic, a report by market research firm Nielsen shows that a whopping 39%, yeah, I'm going to say that again, 39% of Americans claim that while their diets aren't fully plant-based, they eliminate as much animal related type food products as possible and strive to be like mostly plant-based or even all vegan one day, which I feel like that's so encouraging. And because in you listening know this, that Katie and I's approach is it's not restrictive. It has to feel aligned. However you're doing plant-based, it needs to feel aligned. So even making small changes like we're talking about here, just even if you're not fully plant-based, cutting out some animal related products or adding more plants to your diet, that's just a phenomenal shift. And it's really exciting.
And I think that's what I want everybody who's listening to take away, is that's what I want to be more normalized, is like, not only are these, lifestyle choices not on the extremes anymore, we want to normalize them. And not only the fact that, and you've probably heard Ashley and I talk about it, we talk about progress, not perfection, right? And so if your goal is to add more plants to your diet, that is perfectly fine. That doesn't mean that you have to completely change the rest of what you eat, but adding more plants and having long-term goals is to improve your health and get more plants onto your plate. We are on board for that. So definitely, I want that to be the takeaway, is that it is totally okay to just want to the place where you want to start is to just add more plants. And I think that's a perfect way to start, rather than thinking about, okay, what is all the stuff that I have to get rid of? We want you to start thinking, how can I eat that rainbow? How can I add more plants to my plate? And what a way to start the year.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. And actually listening to how these like 39%, how this population is described, it actually reminds me of my parents and my in-laws, who I would say fit into this category. By no means are they 100%, plant-based, no animal products, but they do try to be mostly plant-based with some, flexibility here and there. In fact, Nick actually introduced the term flexitarian to his mom. And I thought it was so funny because this light bulb just went off. She was like, oh yeah, that's me. Cause she's mostly plant-based, but she's also flexible. And I think that fits her lifestyle perfectly.
And I think there's so many people out there that are struggling, and they're like, well, I'm not good enough, or I'm not disciplined enough, or I don't have, it doesn't fit with my culture or my, peer group, or my family's not supportive. If you're participating in Meatless Monday, if you are cutting out eggs for breakfast, if you are, mostly plant-based, except when you go out to a restaurant once a month, that is all, it has to work for you. And that's how it's going to be sustainable for you. So again, progress, not perfection. So I love it. 39%. Let's make it 59% next year.
Yes, that'd be amazing. Yeah. And to reiterate, I mean, you're right. It's not this all or nothing mentality. It's again, doing what works best for you. Yeah. And then lastly, the statistic, which was also very fascinating. Katie pulled this one. The average age for an American vegan is, can you guess? What do you think? It's 22 years old. 22 years old is the average age for an American vegan. And Katie said something when we were researching this and talking about it. What did you say? It was something like basically listening to the young people in a way.
The young people are always hip to the new trends. So
yes,
usually if you follow those youngsters, and I feel mentally like I'm 22, I'm not, but
same.
But normally the younger generations are usually more open and have been around, veganism or going plant-based probably a lot longer than we have. And so maybe didn't grow up with the same kind of mentality that a lot of us did. So they're way more open to new ways of thinking. So
yes,
follow the youngsters most of the time, and they'll show you what's up.
Katie, that's why I'm parting my hair down the middle. You can see it.
I still got a side part. I just don't have the head shape for the middle part.
I think you could do it. All right, Katie, let's transition to plant-based predictions in 2020. Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. God, I almost said 20.
I know it's so weird.
In 2022. So this is primarily centered around like food predictions for 2022. And one thing that we love about these predictions is that it's just highlighting the fact that there is more demand for plant-based alternatives, which is an amazing thing. So whether you're already plant-based, transitioning to plant-based, or heck, whether even if you're not plant-based and you just come across something that looks interesting, like a Beyond Beef patty, it's incredible how this industry is shifting and adapting and providing more plant-based alternatives because consumers are demanding it and it's being provided. So our first one, and this comes from The Beat, is something called mycoprotein, which is a protein made from naturally occurring fungus, which I found very fascinating. And maybe you've heard of the brand Corn. This is something that they actually use a lot in their products. And the reason it's such a popular fermented fungus, I guess, is because it creates sort of that like whole cuts of meat like texture. So more companies are turning toward mycoprotein because it's creating like more of this. I don't even know how to describe it. I feel like this is like weird describing it this way, but like it's like a steak or like a brisket, something that is kind of meaty and has that sort of texture. So it's cool that something out there like this exists. What's really cool too is just how incredibly smart people are that they're able to create this type of stuff. I think that's also really fascinating.
When we talk about food and what people like, I mean, texture, texture is a huge part of it. And so I know that it's a kind of a controversial topic sometimes in the plant-based community, is like, why do we want to eat something that tastes like meat? Why don't we want to get away from that completely? And again, the great advantage to developing these alternatives is to help people with their transition, to make them feel like they're not missing out, and to also help the people that maybe want to go plant-based. Maybe it helps them not feel like they're on the outskirts, that they can enjoy something that gives them the same, texture as a hamburger, but without any animal products being a part of it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I am all for helping people with that transition and letting them experience something that tastes very similar, but that just doesn't have the animal product as a part of it. So what's wrong with that?
I like that. And something you said sparked a memory in my mind of how I went to a cookout. This was a while ago when Beyond Meat first came out with their patties that you could buy at the grocery store. And I remember going to a cookout and bringing a couple of those for Nick and I, and in a way, like feeling so proud because like my burger looked just like everybody else's, but it wasn't meat. And there's just something about that. I was like, I don't know. It was neat because in a way am I putting big quotes around fitting in? I was fitting in with like everyone at the cookout, and my food didn't like really stand out, which oftentimes it does. So it's kind of refreshing to have that type of experience.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about, changing behavior, I'm such a behavior nerd. So there's so much psychology involved, especially when you're talking about group dynamics, about, everybody wants to be part of a tribe and part of a group, and no one wants to stand out, for most of the time they want to just blend in, right? So this is just a part of, like Ashley said, fitting in, to just make sure that, you can just enjoy the barbecue just like everybody else, but just with a little tweak.
Speaking of more options that are coming towards us. So apparently burgers were like a big thing in 2020, like plant-based burgers. And then plant-based chicken was a big thing in 2021. And now they're predicting plant-based fish will actually be the big thing in 2022. That plant-based seafood is expected to gain even more like speed and momentum this year, which I thought was really cool. And this also comes from The Beat.
This makes me very excited because I love the ocean, and I love snorkeling, and I love my fishies. So I love that because there really hasn't been much focus, and the alternatives that are out there now are just really not, they're just not similar at all, in my opinion. So I just usually just kind of steer clear of them just from a taste perspective, preference perspective. So I'm very excited that the research and development is coming out to put more emphasis on seafood alternatives, because I used to love seafood. So
Yeah, I know. We'll see how that goes. I'm excited to see what they come up with. I know that there's some things kind of floating around depending on where you live in the grocery stores these days. And I've bought one thing. I bought some vegan crab cakes somewhere. I think it was at Sprouts in North Carolina, but I haven't tried them yet. So I can't say how they taste based on experience, but I have had something at a restaurant before and it was phenomenal.
yeah, usually as long as I'm not making it, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
And talking more about options. So the next two come from the Vegetarian Times. One prediction that they had quoted and talked about, which I also found incredibly fascinating, is that how plant-based alternatives are really expanding down every aisle in the grocery store. So I don't know if you remember this, Katie, but some grocery stores that I used to go to way back when, it was like one little section that contained all the plant-based, gluten-free, quote, health nut type foods. And you just went there and you were done. But now they're saying, no, it's going to actually be in every aisle, and alternatives are going to be had for everything from like Cheez-Its to Oreos to like condensed milks and all those great things.
I love that. So like, I don't know if you guys, I'm kind of like again, a nerd of all things. So I used to love Shark Tank. So they would always talk about whenever there's like a new food product, how hard it is to get a new food product onto the shelves because there's a finite amount of space, right? So if you take over, a part of the food shelf, that means someone else gets kicked out, right? So I love it that our little vegan items are just shoving our way into all of the little spots in the grocery store instead of our one little pitiful corner that we used to have.
It's true. And I'm sure you've seen this, you listening, you've probably seen this in your grocery store, maybe some changes taking place, whether it's in like the baking section or the cookies or crackers section. It's really cool to see what's going on there. And speaking of that as well, transitioning into the next one that they talked about, they also mentioned that there's going to be less separation between the quote, regular foods. So when I say regular, I mean like, a meat type food, and then a plant-based food. So what they were saying is, and what they're likely to see, and I know I've seen this in some stores as well, is like you'll go to the meat section, but it'll be like plant-based meats too. Those aren't going to be singled out either.
But again, it's back to that psychology. Like if you have a patty that looks just like a meat patty and you have them right next to each other in the grocery store, like that is going to make a lot of people stop and be like, okay, I have two options. They look really similar. And if we can get the demand up, then that cost hopefully can go down, where if there's not that cost factor, there's no choice. Like you would obviously go with the plant-based option that may be a little bit better for you. And, there's no animal products in it. So I love that. I love that they're just going to be right next to it. Cause a lot of times if you separate it, some people might skip that section altogether, but if they're right next to each other, people really have to stop and, it makes them think. And a lot of times that's all people need is just that extra couple of seconds to think about it and be like, oh, okay, let me try this.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. They were saying that the consumer will go, let's say, to the standard American, eating the standard American diet, will go to like the meat section and look at burgers, but then they'll be like, oh, well, what's this, plant-based patty or beyond patty? And it might pique their interest to branching out and trying something new. They say it's possible, and that they think that's going to happen. So that'd be really exciting. These next two come from Vegan Food and Living. And Katie, one thing we haven't talked about yet is vegan eggs. So what they're saying here is that in 2022, that we will have even more choice for egg-free creations. So more companies are going to be launching egg-free alternatives. And one thing that I also found really interesting that I read was that Just Egg, which is pretty popular in the US and Canada, if I remember correctly, from clients that have talked to me about it. But also too, they launched last year, I think the end of last year, in Europe, which is really awesome. So they're going like worldwide all over the place, which is really exciting. And apparently they are wanting to become the quote, most consumed egg in the world, end quote. And I think that's phenomenal.
It's good to have goals.
Isn't it though?
I love it. And especially with eggs, I think there's a lot more history related to meat. But I think if you can provide an egg alternative that tastes the same, I don't think anybody's attached, really attached to a scrambled egg alternative. If it looks the same and tastes the same, why not? So again, it's about providing those options. So I love that because the demand is there, the money is there to do the research to make everything taste better. And if you guys haven't tried a tofu scramble or a just egg scramble, to me, if you have, the right seasoning, it really tastes the same.
It's true. I have a story about that. I actually made a tofu scramble. This was a couple years ago for family members. So I was aware of their allergies and all that type of stuff. I made a tofu scramble for family members for breakfast. And they had no idea that it was tofu because I seasoned it. It was like the same color because I used a little bit of turmeric powder, and it was like the most amazing thing ever.
And they were like, this is so delicious.
Yeah. So, and with eggs as well, what they're also saying is that it's very possible that the first plant-based boiled egg will become available later this year. So we'll see if that happens.
Very cool.
And then last, number 6, vegan fast food. So this is in response to consumer demand, is that in November of 2021, so last year, November 2021, McDonald's began a trial run of what's called the McPlant. And the McPlant is like a Beyond Meat patty, and then it has vegan cheese, a vegan like sandwich sauce, that's very similar, I think, to the Big Mac. Yes. And they basically quote like normalized this like vegan burger at McDonald's. So anyways, they launched this like in Texas and several other states. And according to reports, people really, really liked it. And so they plan on launching it nationwide.
Nice. I mean, what an indication that this behemoth like McDonald's, that I think it says that on all of their signs and stuff, how many burgers they sell per year or something. It's just a crazy amount. And the fact that is their, the Big Mac, that's their bread and butter, that they would offer an option like this, that just shows that, things are shifting. And usually if the big guy is making changes, the little guy usually follows suit. They want to get on that gravy train too, that vegan gravy train. So I just think kind of like when Burger King a couple years ago, when they introduced the Impossible Burger, no one's saying like live off the Impossible Burger or whatever. But if someone invites me to go to lunch to Burger King, I can feel like I can go and I have an option that's not a salad or that's not a glass of water. That, I have an option too. It's just having those options, those alternatives, that makes everybody feel like they're included. Inclusion makes people feel good. It makes people feel like they're not on the outskirts, that they're normal too, right? So, it doesn't feel good to feel like you're a burden. Oh, I can't get anything there. So, can we go somewhere else? That can be hard for a lot of people that maybe they're not as confident, or maybe they're shy, or anybody. We all want to feel included. So I think having these alternatives is a good shift.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a really good point too, is like these companies are responding to consumer demand, and it's making it easier for people like you and I, or people like yourself, you listening, be able to have these options at your fingertips, to be able to go to a place like Burger King and not feel like, you can't eat anything.
It's not just that we're saying like, oh, McDonald's is now like the best place ever, right? It's the fact that things are shifting. So if something like McDonald's makes it normal to have a plant-based alternative, then that means other restaurants are going to be like, oh, we should probably have a plant-based alternative, right? And I'm talking about mom and pops and chains and, really expensive restaurants. So when you're thinking about going out to eat, we want to be able to, again, have those options where, it's not just a salad. It's not just a portobello steak. That's usually like big options. So again, it's just about having those alternatives available. So I am just loving the shift that we're seeing, and I can't wait to see the next couple years. Because if you really take the time to look back and see where we were 3 years ago to now, it's like, oh my gosh, we have so much more. So now thinking 3 years ahead, it's so exciting of what's to come.
If you're starting your transition maybe this month, then you're starting at a good time because there are a lot of options out there. Yeah. Which is, I guess, could be good or bad. It can be overwhelming as well. Well, if there's a trend that you want to see, or an idea or a trend that you've seen, definitely tag us on Instagram. You can screenshot this, your screen, this podcast, and tag us on Instagram, because I'd be curious to see and hear too, like what else people want to see, or what they're excited about, or what they've read about, because there's a lot of different trends happening, which is really cool.
And I think, just talking about predictions and what's to come, and talking about kind of consumer savviness, like I think just like everything, it kind of comes with a caveat. This plant-based thing is now almost becoming trendy, and it's going to be a marketing tool for people to utilize. So kind of thinking about that as a caveat, to just make sure that you are, regardless of what you eat, that you are a informed consumer. As we were doing research, Ashley and I were talking, and I was in the freezer aisle, and they had these kind of new, it was big green letters with like leaves in the logos, like plant-based meat veggie cups or something like that. And if I hadn't been paying attention, I would have put it in my cart, but in little letters at the bottom, it was like made with real cheese, made with real egg. And like they use that, big green lights, like, oh, this is made with plant-based meat, so it must be fine. But if I hadn't been paying attention, again, it would have gone in my cart and I would have wasted $6 or whatever. So just make sure that you're, regardless of what you eat, that we are being a smart consumer, that we're still paying attention to labels, and we're still reading that fine print, so we don't get bamboozled.
It's true. And too, I like that you said that. And also too, paying attention, being an informed consumer, and paying attention and really listening to what feels best in your body as well, because we're all different. We all know our bodies best. And it really is up to you to just decide on what you're putting into your body and what is best for your body, because no one can tell you what you should or shouldn't eat. It really is up to you.
100%.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful that you're here. Happy 2022. We hope you're having a marvelous January, and we look forward to hearing if you have any predictions. We'd love to see them.
All right. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Until next time, keep thriving.